faith stories,
My now wife Chelsea was like, "Hey, you're coming to church with me on Sunday," and I was like, "All right, I've been looking at the Bible. Let's do this."
fishing memories.
When I first started, I was just fish, focus on the fish. And I see the kid catch a fish, I'm like, good job, perfect, awesome. And then he goes up there and I'm like, we're catching slot snook. And this kid's up here going, oh, the breeze. I'm like, this is exactly what it's about.
Meaningful conversations.
You have to stay in the Word. You have to have a good support system. You have to know what the end goal is. You have to know who God is.
Positivity. This is the Faith and Fishing Podcast. Your hosts, Cam Steele.
If your identity is you're an angler, whenever you're not doing well in the water, that's whenever you can't be content.
And Robert Randolph.
And his timing is perfect. We might not always agree with it, and we might not always understand it at the moment.
Bring you interviews with some amazing guests from the fishing community and discuss all things to do with fishing and their faith. Welcome to the family.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the Faith and Fishing Podcast. I'm Cam.
Hey, and I'm Robert.
And welcome to our first interview back from our kind of unplanned hiatus. Our last episode was not sure how long ago at this point, but it was just kind of explaining to y'all why we were gone for so long and letting you know that we're coming back in full force, but we're going to build up a little bit of a backlog first. But welcome back. Robert, how's it going, man?
Man, it's going pretty good. I can't complain. Working hard, getting kids off to college, and getting ready for a long weekend. Go to the beach and might do some surf fishing. I don't think I'm taking the kayaks, but we'll probably wet a line at some point in time this weekend. What about you? What are you going to?
I don't know if I'm going to get a chance to wet a line this weekend, but we'll see how it goes. But yeah, everything's going pretty good over our way. But yeah, so we have a great episode. We are delivering on one of our goals and promises already. I wanted to do more multi-species, saltwater, getting away from everything being about bass. So excited to have our guest on this episode, but did want to go ahead and give a shout out to Jade's Jigs, Get Outdoors, Naqua, Omnia Fishing, Mr. B Lure Company, and Savior Outdoors for supporting the channel. And shout out to Carolina Waters. That is how I got connected with our guest. This episode is she is on the Carolina Waters team with me. So excited about this one. But yeah, Robert, did you have anything to add in terms of announcements or anything like that before we dove into it?
No, I just I enjoyed the little fall that we had for a week here, and it was nice and like the low 80s, and now this week it's back to the 90s and back to the summertime being hot again. So I'll be glad when fall actually gets all the way back, and football's starting up and a little bit of fall action on the water. So hopefully we'll get some cooler temps back in here next week. That's
ambitious for North Carolina. All right. All right. Well, let's go ahead. Let's thank Get Outdoors, and then let's jump into the episode.
Sounds good.
Get Outdoors Pedal and Paddle is one of the largest canoe, kayak, and cycling retailers in the Southeast, with a huge selection of kayaks, canoes, bikes, and all the accessories needed to experience paddling and cycling comfortably and safely. Get Outdoors helps to expand and educate the paddling community through their free demos held on local lakes in the Greensboro, North Carolina area, and through in-store clinics and on the water courses and demos. And we'll even get your new boat rigged up for kayak fishing for you. Stop by the shop in Greensboro, North Carolina, or visit them online at shopgetoutdoors.com to be wowed by their selection.
All right, so I teased it a little bit in our intro there. We are going to be talking a lot of saltwater stuff this episode, kind of inshore saltwater. So right up both of our alley a little bit there. And we are going to be talking about some really fun things like stand-up paddleboard fishing, modular kayaks, and we might even jump into the world of fitness in this episode, which is admittedly something that you can look at me and tell that I'm not well versed in. But we're going to dive into it with fellow fellow Carolina Waters team member Dominique Mitchell. So, Dom, welcome to the show.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So to get us started, go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us who Dom Mitchell is.
So my name is Dominique Mitchell, and I've been fishing for quite a few years now. And I mean, I've done a variety of fishing, from paddleboard fishing, kayak fishing is what I mostly do now. And my preference is saltwater fishing. So I guess we're going to dive into all those topics tonight.
Absolutely. So let's start with let's start with what it is that you like to fish for.
So my favorite species would actually be red drum. I don't really go out and target red drum per se, but I mean that's my favorite fish to catch. I end up catching a lot of flounder instead, but it's always a good day if I catch a red drum. I just like the fight.
Yeah, the elusive North Carolina flounder is so, you just can't find them anywhere, and then
Right, that part, yeah.
it's crazy. Yeah.
So Robert, I know you're being facetious, but the fact that you can be facetious about that means that the stinginess with them is working at least a little bit, because there for a while there were a couple of seasons where biologists were saying that we were 10 years away from never being able to fish for flounder in North Carolina again if things kept going the way they were. So,
well, I think they may still be feeding that line to people a little bit, but that's a whole nother episode. But at the same time, I know that from this past year that there are an abundance of flounder, and they're super fun to catch. So I'm okay with it because
abundance is a strong word. There's not much of an abundance of anything these days.
Yes, it's like bass though. Some people can go to the lake and catch 15 or 20 bass, and then I can go and catch one. So it's an abundance to them because they know where they're at, and then it's not an abundance to me because I can't find them. So that's kind of the same thing with the flounder. The few times that I've been this year, we've done pretty decent, and I just hear a lot of people are having, good success. And to me, it doesn't matter. I'm not looking to keep 30 to go fillet out and cook. I like to catch them and release them. In the same way with bass, I'm not going to feed my family, but I know a lot of people are doing that, and it's they get a little disgruntled when they go and, just like Dom said, you're maybe targeting trout or you're targeting reds, and you're just catching flounder after flounder after flounder, and then for there not to be a great season for that is slightly frustrating.
Yeah, for sure, and it will be. But yeah, like you said, that's a podcast for another time. Yeah. But what about you, Dom? Are you fishing for keeps in the inshore? Are you fishing for the frying pan, or are you catch and release mostly as well?
Honestly, mostly catch and release. I would like to learn more about the cleaning process. Honestly, I haven't kept many of my catches. Last year I did catch a red drum, and I cooked it. It was really awesome. It tasted great. So I was like, I might have to rethink that the next time. Actually start keeping them.
Yeah, for sure. I personally, my wife does not like to eat fish, and I'm not a big fan of cleaning fish. So most of the time, I'm catch and release too, just because I figure, if I do want to eat some fish, there's several really solid seafood markets near me that
Yeah.
I can go to. But every now and then I do fill up the cooler a little bit and go at it a little bit. But yeah, for sure. So what was it that kind of got you started in fishing?
Well, honestly, believe it or not, so I grew up like about 5 minutes from Lake Waccamaw, North Carolina. So I lived about 5 minutes from the lake, but I never really grew up fishing. I would go to ponds with my dad, fishing for panfish with worms. But I was probably 19, 20 before I got into bass fishing. And it was one of my first boyfriends that got me into bass fishing. And that was actually my first time, I believe, on a boat on Lake Waccamaw. And so I was pretty much hooked after that. And I would just go, on my own with the things I had learned from my experiences with him on the water. And later on, a few years later, is when I got into saltwater fishing.
Okay.
And then it kind of just changed the game from there.
So what was it that kind of pushed you towards saltwater? Was it that you caught one and you were like, man, that sucks after this, or was it just location?
I think it's like a combination of things, like the scenery for me, like being on the ICW to me, like I just love it out there. It's like the saltwater marshes and like the whole environment to me is very peaceful and tranquil out there. But also the fact that I never know what I'm going to catch is always like surprising. Whereas if I'm targeting bass, 9 times out of 10, that's what I'm going to catch.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And for those of you listening that are, in Indiana or Ohio, ICW is Intercoastal Waterway. Goes, I don't know, from Florida up to Virginia, Maryland.
Yeah, I'm not sure where it ends on the north side. Maybe the Chesapeake Bay, probably, I would say. Yeah. So yeah, the Intercoastal Waterway is basically like, an inshore highway, and then you have all the cuts and creeks that go off of that, and then you have the inlets and that go out to the ocean, and so yeah. So are you? What's your theory on which Cam is probably going to get on me for jumping ahead, but you're fishing an outgoing tide or an incoming tide? What's your, or the tops or the bottoms? Which do you like better, or do you have a preference?
That's a good question. Lately, I've been fishing a lot out of like Oak Island, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I feel like high tide is better for me. Like I don't do as well around low tide, but I find I've done better during high tide.
Yeah, high tide's good. See, she knows where all the flounder are.
Yeah, for sure. I whenever I am in the sound, I do like a moving tide, but it just depends on where I'm at, because there are some places like when I'm surf fishing that I prefer fishing at low tide, because I can hit the target with my cast, whereas at high tide it's too far away. So it all depends. But yeah, I've always been told high tide's best.
Yeah, I like it all. I mainly I don't either fish a certain tide, but I've got to where I like the outgoing. I got where where the tide's falling. I tend to like that. I seem to have more luck on that just because I can, focus on those creeks and those cuts and stuff where the water's coming back out. And it just seems like, especially the flounder will set up, and they'll set up where that water's coming out of there, and you'll get at least one good one off of a cut. But then when it's coming back in, you can get in the front of those where you have a lot of current coming through the front of those pockets right at the intercoastal, and they tend to set up there. I like both of them, but I agree that the moving in or out one way or the other is better than the very top or the very bottom. So yeah, I fish out of Oak Island if I'm going saltwater fishing, that's normally where I'm going out of. So we probably fish some of the same water. That's why we are both talking
Okay.
about flounder. There's quite a bit of flounder, and we talked about this a little bit on the last podcast. But me and a lot of some kayak guys that bass fished from around central North Carolina went towards the front of the summer and had a really good weekend and caught a lot of flounder, a lot of trout, and then a couple of reds, and I caught a pretty good sized red, and that was a ton of fun. So I'm looking to kind of expand where I'm going out of. I usually go out of 57th Street, but that Fish Factory and all of that boat ramps and stuff look pretty enticing down there too. But it's a good area. Definitely a lot of people fish in that area. There's a lot of fish, and then a couple people from work have been catching. When we were going, a ton of sheephead too, which I really haven't got on the sheephead kick. But have you had any experience catching sheephead?
Honestly, no. I've only been once, and that was near Ocean Owl. But they kept stealing my bait. But
Yeah.
I would like to get more into sheephead fishing. I think that would be fun. I heard, and they're pretty good to eat too, I've heard.
They are delicious. I have attempted once, and I had the same experience. I got a ton of bites, but I wasn't able to hook up.
Mhm.
But someone that we've had on the podcast before, Travis Harrison, he oh man, it's a Bible verse. I think it's like 43:11 fishing or something like that. He makes some jig heads called jawbreaker jigs that are specifically for sheep's heads. So and whenever I go again, I'm gonna have to try that out. But yeah, so whenever you moved over to saltwater fishing, were you did you kind of jump straight onto the stand-up paddleboard, or did you start on the bank, or how did that transition go?
Honestly, it was from a boat first. I had a good friend that did a lot of saltwater fishing that introduced me to a lot of the waters, and that's where I learned a lot. And then whenever I started going solo is when I decided to buy a stand-up paddleboard.
Okay, what made you go with the stand-up paddleboard?
So I own a little John boat prior to the stand-up paddleboard. But the John boat I mostly use for Lake Waccamaw for bass fishing. I had that for about 3 years or so, but I never felt that confident taking it out on my own. I would a few times, but mechanically, if something was to break, I didn't know how to repair it. So I was like, I think I'm gonna sell it, and then I was like, what should I get that I can easily transport? So I decided on an inflatable paddleboard. And there was a little bit of an adjustment. But I would strap my cooler down to it and sit on the cooler to fish.
Okay, so I have never been on a stand-up paddleboard. My Instagram handle is the Clumsy Kayak Angler for a reason. I don't really trust myself on a stand-up paddleboard because I'm not worried about it flipping over. I'm just worried about falling off of it. But what is it like fighting a fish on one of those things? Like, what is since you've got experience in a kayak, on a boat, on a stand-up paddleboard, what are the kind of the differences and the advantages of a stand-up paddleboard versus kind of the disadvantages?
Well, with the stand-up paddleboard, the transportation was very easy. Like even if I'm traveling, I could easily take that with me in the back of my SUV. It does allow for like sight fishing because I can stand up. Whereas if I'm on a kayak, I'm limited mostly to sitting down. I can stand on a kayak too, but it's not as much. The balance is a bit harder than on the paddleboard. With the paddleboard, it can be challenging. Luckily, I never hooked up to a red on the stand-up because I don't know how that would have ended. I mostly caught flounder off of it, but I would also have an anchor, so it would take you for a little ride, And I imagine if it was a drum, it might be a longer ride, but
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely a different type of experience on a stand-up paddleboard.
For sure. Yeah, we've never talked to anybody about stand-up paddleboard fishing on this podcast before, so I definitely wanted to get that question in there and see what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it. And another thing we've never talked about on this podcast is modular kayaks. And you told me in our kind of pre-show that is what you're mostly out of now. Tell us about that. What is a modular kayak? How does that work? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of that versus the paddleboard?
So even when I had the paddleboard, like I was thinking for a long time, like what would I get next? And I didn't want to just regular kayak because I didn't want to paddle. And I mean that with the stand up, that's the biggest like con is you have to paddle a lot, so you really can't go far distance on a stand up. So with the kayak, I was looking for something again that I could easily transport. And I also put that in the back of my SUV as well. So it does break apart. And it was one of the first ones I've seen like that was pedal drive. And so I was looking for something that was pedal drive and that I could easily transport, and it didn't cost me like an arm and a leg. It was a little over 1,000. So it wasn't too bad, but it's a new company called Real Yak, and it's been working good so far. That's what I've been using now. I haven't used the stand-up paddleboard since I bought the kayak.
Okay. Go for it, Robert.
No, it's just interesting to me. So how many pieces does that go into? Is it just a front and the back? Is there a middle section too? Is it 2 pieces?
Yeah, so actually it's just 2 pieces.
Okay. Huh.
What kind of connection is it?
It's almost kind of like, well, someone called it like a puzzle piece. The way that it's like designed is it like fits perfectly. Like when you put one piece on top of the other, it locks in place automatically, but then it comes with a lock on top of it that snaps back. Okay. And so it's very secure. Like I never worry about it like breaking in half or coming apart,
Right. And then as far as the pedal drive goes, is it the propeller style or is it the fin style that you kind of kick back and forth?
Yeah, it's a fin drive.
I didn't know they made modular pedal drive kayaks.
Yeah, that's interesting to me. That's really, really cool though, and that kind of takes the whole transportation piece out, car topping piece, and
right.
So that's probably a great niche for the companies that make that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
and also the weight of it. Like I wanted a pedal drive, but I didn't want anything like extremely heavy.
Yeah, for sure. That's one of my biggest complaints about most modern fishing kayaks is the weight. So whenever you're breaking it in half and carrying it piece by piece, that takes that aspect out of it too. And yeah. I guess with a modular kind of setup, you go kind of minimal in terms of gear that you're bringing along. What do you typically bring along with you?
So I like you said, I do try to go minimum with the gear. I try not to take a lot, like 2 rods at the most, and I usually take like a crate and a backpack, my anchor, and my tackle box, and I think that's pretty much it.
All right. And so, are you a live bait fan or a artificial fan, or do you go back and forth?
Well, since I've been doing like kayak fishing and stand-up paddleboard fishing, honestly, I've been like solely artificial, and I usually use Gulp shrimp. That's like my go-to. Okay. I may get into using live bait and get in like an aerator to keep it alive, or trying like fiddler crab and such. But yeah, most of what I use is artificial bait.
Okay, cool. Robert, you got any more questions for her before we switch gears?
What are we switching to? We still fishing, or are we switching gears totally?
I was going to switch gears totally.
So yeah, I got a couple more fishing questions.
All right.
So I want to see if you found a solution to this, because I have a solution, but it's not one that everybody has. So if you're fishing on, let's just say Lake Wakima, you're going to have some wind that you deal with occasionally if you go out on a windy day. But if you're on the intercoastal, you're dealing with wind every time you go out. So uh, I'm lucky enough to have a setup that I have a motor on, and I have a micro power pole on a kayak. So if I get into, like we were talking about earlier, and the tide is coming back out, I can either just power pole down. But I was with a lot of people, and there was 4 or 5 of us, and a couple of people didn't have those options, and man, it was a struggle for them to fight the wind and the current, and it's just a whole different ball game. So how do you combat that with the current along with the wind? And I know you said you had an anchor, but is that your main source of kind of staying put?
Honestly, yeah, what you're saying, that is a huge like
It
issue
is.
with
Yeah.
kayak fishing on the intercoastal. Usually, to be honest, if the winds are over like maybe 12, 13 miles per hour, I won't even attempt to go out because I know it's going to be a challenge. So I try to pick, good conditions to begin with. But also, yeah, the anchor is really the only thing that I take. And it works okay. I mean, sometimes I'm still drifting along a little bit,
Mhm.
but without the anchor, it's almost impossible.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All you're doing is just trying to keep in a spot where you want to get a couple cast in. And
Yeah.
yeah, we were doing that, and my son was with me in another kayak, and his connection to his battery went out, so he lost his motor, and we were just like, man, we might as well go. We might as well go in, because you can't even deal with it. So yeah. All right, that's all I had. Now you can switch gears if you want to, Cam.
So I was gonna piggyback off of that.
All right.
Where do you attach to your anchor on your kayak?
I actually have it like wrapped around like a PVC pipe, and I forgot what type of anchor it actually is, but I have it attached to like a carabiner, and
Yeah.
it's just attached to the kayak. I don't have the actual system, the anchor system, hooked up. And then sometimes too, if like I've forgotten it before, and I actually would have to use the grab to hold me in place. That's if like I don't have anything. And even sometimes if I do have the anchor, I still try to use the grab.
Yeah, that is a good way to kind of nose up into that and try to stay put.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Whenever do you have like an anchor that you clip in and out of with a float in case you hook onto something big, and clip off of your anchor and then go back and find it later?
No, but that is a good idea. I do need that. I haven't hooked into anything big enough for that, but that is a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So to kind of rotate towards something that, if we ever have talked about this on the podcast, it's been a very long time since we've talked about it on the podcast. But so on your Instagram account, you've got faith, family, fishing, and fitness. So kind of talk about that a little bit. Why is fitness so important to you? And kind of hit us with a couple fitness, what's the word, tips for us. Those of us who are like, as Will Smith said on Men in Black, are a little soggy around the midsection.
Well, fitness, I feel like, I know for me personally, it's kind of been like a lifelong journey. And even before fishing, or around that same time, I got into fitness. And so it's always just been very important to me. I think it's something that people either value or they don't. And a lot of people either take it seriously or they don't. I feel like there's no really in between much. And back in the day, I used to do like P90X when that first came out. And I mean, there's been several years, but I would go to the gym and just maintain a gym membership. But I get bored with the gym, so I actually just use an app. I use the Fit On app, And I work out from home, so I do all my workouts from home. But for me personally, fitness, like, I mean, if I go more than a few days without working out, like, I feel like I need to work out again, like just to keep it up. But yeah, it's always been something that I value.
Okay, for sure. So you said typically it's something that somebody values or they don't. You have any tips for somebody to try to turn that corner from being someone that they don't really value it towards valuing it?
I think it is like a very important part of overall health, especially physical health. And I think that once you start, I don't know, like putting more emphasis on physical health overall, that it'll kind of like influence you or, encourage you to, start taking fitness more seriously and start to want to work out, I would say. And then also, once you get into it, you start to see the results. Like, I think that's big. Like, once you start to see the results, I feel like that can be life changing and that can make people want to stick to it.
Maybe that's my issue, is I just haven't hit that I see the results part yet.
So I'll chime in on that because I have gone stretches of being enthralled in some fitness routines, and my wife works out every day. Probably, maybe she might take off Sunday, but she runs. If she's not running, she'll usually run on like Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, and then she'll work out and do dumbbells or other stuff, other routines. And we did P90X for a long time, so we still say man on man a Chevis all the time because that's what Tony Horton would say when he was doing those P90X routines. But I think it's just really starting and committing to, I'm going to do something on this schedule and then sticking to it. And then you can just kind of build it from there. It doesn't have to be P90X or running or whatever. You just come up with what you want to do and just be committed and just say, I'm not going to miss this, and I'm going to make sure I do this on this schedule. And then you just do it no matter what. And then once you get into that, like we probably did P90X for a couple years straight, like legit, the whole plyometrics, everything that was on there. And we started out and we couldn't do any of it. And then when we ended up, we could do everything on there. So I think it's just deciding and staying committed to it. And then it's like Dom said, once you start that, you don't want to stop it because, it does make you feel better. I still try to work out, but I mostly do 12-ounce curls now and not on the regular like I was just with
12-pound curls.
Yeah, 12-pound, 12-ounce. So it's really just staying committed to it and making sure that you're staying on schedule with it. And so that would be my advice to somebody looking to get into it, is kind of figure out and just say, this is what I'm doing, and then you can adjust from there.
So I've heard from a lot of different sources that once you start, you get addicted to it. How long does it take for that to kick in? Because most of the time, every time I start, there is no like I am joking and complaining throughout the whole thing to the point where my wife doesn't even want to do it beside me anymore. And I am very much I cannot wait for this to be over with. And once I'm done with it, I'm like, I hope I never have to do that again. Like, how long until it becomes that, like, I can't live without it?
That's a good question. And even thinking back, I don't know that I could give an answer like as far as like how long. Maybe within a few months, possibly. But for me, I feel like one of the keys is doing an activity, an exercise that you will enjoy. I think that's important. Like, I don't do workouts that I don't enjoy, like, at all. Like, I'm not big on cardio, so I like to lift weights. And, like, if it involves, like, weights or strength training or something like that, I'm more apt to do it. So I don't even usually bother with the cardio workouts, but sometimes they have them incorporated within the strength training. But also, like, even with the pedal drive kayak, I mean, that's a workout in itself. I don't do a separate workout on the days that I kayak or paddleboard. Um, I might ride my bicycle, which is a beach cruiser, for like an hour or so, and that's, I mean, that's a leisurely workout. Um, but it just depends. In the morning times, like before I go to work, sometimes I like to dance for a few minutes because dancing's always like, it's just one of those ways to get the mood up before going into work. It's not something most people do, I know, but lately I've started doing that because it makes my mood like higher before I get to work.
Interesting. Yeah, that's good too. And I'll tell you, Cam, the one thing that kept me motivated in it is and kind of how we started working out. And it's been when the kids were really small, so it's probably been 12 or 13 years ago. We signed up for a 5K, and I had done 5Ks in the past, but it had been a long stretch. It had been a very long stretch. But then having kids and wanting to kind of show them, and I know that you're kind of in that stage where you have young kids and kind of wanting them to do like, oh, let's go do the 1 mile fun run. And then the next time, we did it, we signed up for the 5K, and then we ran 3 times a week, like a mile and a half. And then we built up to that. And then before you know it, we both did the rock and roll half marathon in Raleigh. And then my wife does that stuff all the time. She's doing a triathlon coming up in a couple weeks in either Topsail or somewhere down there. They're having a triathlon. So she's still very active into that. But that's one way that kept me motivated is I wanted to be able to do those things. And then there was a race date. And so now we got 2 months to build up to this 5K that we're doing. And then, once you get your kids involved in it, that keeps you motivated too, because you don't want to be the one slowing down the family. You know what I mean? Because you're super dad and you're not supposed to slow the family down. So that kept me motivated in kind of doing that and staying on track too. So I know that's the way a lot of people will approach that.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I have all of these questions is I've hit that point in my life where I'm like, if I want to be able to, go out and play basketball with the kids and not feel like I'm going to die. And I want to make sure that I'm sticking around long enough to see the big moments in their life. And the day that Henry took his first steps was the heaviest I've ever been. And I've dropped 30 pounds from that and then came up another little bit. So I'm about 20 pounds or so lighter than I was that day. And I'm trying to, I hit that one good downswing by changing diet stuff. And I want to hit another downswing and then another one and another one. So that's why I'm asking these questions, is because, it's selfish. I want to know the answers this time. It's not just, we might have a listener who wants to know that answer. Is like, no, I want to know these answers.
Yeah. I'm sure it's helping the listeners out too, because it's always good to hear other people talk about those things and get some motivation. You got to get some motivation wherever you can get it from.
For sure. All right. Well, let's switch gears again, and let's dive into your faith. So, kind of tell us your faith story. What is it you believe, and how did you come to believe that?
So I was raised in a Christian home. Southern Baptist was the denomination. I started going to church like very young. Gosh, probably before I was a toddler, I imagine. And I was always, I sang in a choir as a kid, involved in Wednesday night Bible studies and stuff like that. But so both of my parents were involved in church. But I I actually did not become a Christian. I didn't accept Jesus into my life as my Lord and Savior until I was 27. And so it was a long journey of going to church and going through devotions and sometimes being forced to go. You know, as long as they would always say, as long as you're in this household, you're going to be attending church on Sunday. So it wasn't really an option as a child up until I was about 18. Um, so I feel like, you know, I was raised in that atmosphere and I knew all about God and I knew the stories of the Bible and everything, but I didn't have a personal relationship with God until much later in life. And I mean, there was times between like 17, 18 till like 27 where I explored different routes. And I think I just had to come to terms with I had to find Jesus on my own and find my own, I mean, by going through my own journey. And I mean, that looks different for everyone. And even though I was raised in a Christian home, I mean, I feel like I needed that to get to where I am now.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's a similar story that a lot of people have. I know that kind of mirrors, you know, we weren't really given the option, and then you kind of figure that out along the way and figure out what that means and what that means to you, and then, you know, make that commitment to kind of accept him into your life and have that personal relationship. So I can relate to that for sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can, absolutely. And it's uh, it's interesting whenever like you hear like stories like that where, you know, both parents were very active in church and everything. It seems like, you know, those are the, like, you always end up with a solid foundation there, and then like that way it seems like whenever both parents are involved in church that way, most of the time that that kid does end up, you know, branching out, trying to find Jesus on their own, finding their own way and everything. But they have that strong foundation to come back to. So once they start building their own foundation, like that foundation is there. Um, and That's not to say that, you know, that both everyone who has both parents in church is going to end up as a strong Christian individual or anything like that. But it's also not to say that if you don't have two parents that were super involved in church, that you also are can't have a strong faith. That's just an observation. Just a little opportunity there for Cam to go on a little ramble.
We like it.
Awesome. There are a couple questions that we ask every guest who comes on the podcast. One of those is what fishing story or memory means the most to you?
Wow, that's a good one. I'm trying to go back through all of them now. I would probably have to say it was actually one that was kind of recent. I think that was last year. So I was fishing with some new friends I had met, and it was at Ocean Owl, and I caught a red drum. It's the biggest red drum I've ever caught. So that's probably one of the reasons why it stands out. But I was fishing with some fellow Native Americans. So I'm Native American, and it was my first time fishing with the people that I was going with. And one of the guys, I mean, his name is Sean Lowry, but he has his own YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And it's
I know him.
pretty popular.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's a really funny guy, so he kept
Yes,
me
he is.
entertained. And like, I mean, I didn't expect to catch a fish that size, but I mean, I was hoping to. But it was a really great story, like how everything turned out, and we all clicked on the trip and stuff, and it was a really great day overall.
Yeah, he seems like a really good guy.
I can imagine like catching a really big red and having Sean as your hype man has got to be special. Like I can understand why you targeted in on or zeroed in on that memory for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's one of those that I will never forget. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Robert, you
Yeah.
got
So,
one?
yeah, no. So what about, I think it's been a long time since we asked these questions. So I struggled for a second, but I'm glad you started because I think I have one, and then maybe it's a different question from a different set. Who knows? But what about when you're out on the water? What's your conversation normally like? What do you got? What are you talking about? And do you fish with a group of people like that a lot, or is that kind of like a one-off?
Honestly, I don't. It would be my preference to, but I don't fish with others as much as I'd like to. Um, I love to have company on the water. I think it makes for, a better day of fishing overall. But yeah, and I fished with Jay Jackson. I'm sure you've had him on the show before. So
Oh,
he
yeah.
and we fished together a few times, and I mean he's like
Yeah,
kayak fishing expert. So I've learned a lot from him as well. Enjoyed the times fishing with him also.
yeah. J2 Country is pretty good people. Yeah, we've had him on, and then we did. I did. He was with Old Town at one of the lakes up here, and they were doing some demo stuff. So I spent some time with him that day too. So he's a good dude.
Most definitely. All right. Well, we have reached the point of the show where we jump into our "What's Your Favorite" segment. It's pretty self-explanatory. We're going to ask you your favorite in a few different categories, and we are going to get that started right after this.
Okay.
It's time for What's Your Favorite? Powered by Nakwa Adventure Gear. Power that fits in the palm of your hand.
All right. Robert, are you ready for What's Your Favorite?
Yeah, maybe because I have a list here that's a handwritten list, and I'm hoping it's the right list. But I'm going to start it out with what's your favorite, and we're going to go with scripture. So, what's your favorite scripture from the Bible?
Oh wow. I would probably say Philippians 4:13. Yeah, that one. It's always been very empowering. That's my go-to scripture. And my birthday is also April 13th. And I was like, I mean, this is one of those scriptures where it makes a person feel like, that they can do all things through Christ, But, because I mean, he provides us the strength to do everything. So
Yeah, that is a good one.
Absolutely. What about a particular story from the Bible? Is there one of those that's your favorite?
that's a good question. I was actually talking to a coworker about that today. Um, I don't know. Jonah and the whale is one that stands out because I mean, the whole, like, it just seems so outlandish, but I think that probably is my favorite story. Like, there's a lot of lessons that can be, learned throughout that story.
Absolutely.
So we're going to switch it up and go to a little bit of fishing. What's your favorite fish to fish for?
The red drum.
All right. So that's favorite to fish for is which one's your favorite to target? What's your favorite fish to catch?
I mean, I honestly would say both because, like, reeling in the red drum is the reason why it's my favorite fish to catch.
There you go.
I mean, well, yeah, target and fish for. Yeah.
All right.
And what about favorite fish to eat?
Gosh. I would say cobia is really high on the list. I think cobia is really good.
Cobia sits at the top of mine, and you're the first person to share that with me. So, yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. All right. So, Robert is, he's got a sheet in front of him. I'm trying to do this off of memory. So if I end up going a little out of order, he's going to have to forgive me. But
I'm just glad I got the right sheet. Sorry, I talked over him. He's talking about what's your favorite fishing snacks, favorite snack to eat on the water.
Oh, okay. Wow. So I would normally say apples because I like to carry an apple with me everywhere, like work, fishing. It's just convenient. But I really like these protein cookies. So I'll stop by the gas station and get one of those. They have like at least 20 grams of protein, but to me it lasts longer, like at least 4 hours.
Huh. Okay. Is there a particular brand or flavor that's your favorite?
It's a macadamia nut cookie, but I can't remember the actual brand. They're very popular because I see them in a lot of stores.
I got you. And I will say I'm not like a huge apple person, but if you keep your apple in the cooler, a cold apple on a hot day of fishing, that's pretty good right there. If your teeth can handle it. I know some people, like, they got the sensitive teeth, they can't bite into a cold apple like that.
Oh, yeah.
We'll switch to favorite body of water.
I would probably say, I think it's pronounced Leah Huff Island. It's near Riceville Beach and Topsail. But the water out there is so blue. It's a really beautiful place. And that's definitely my favorite place in North Carolina.
Interesting.
All right. What is your favorite lure to throw?
Favorite lure?
I think we touched on it earlier, probably, unless you're going to surprise me. But
now she's racking.
Well, I do like the Gulf shrimp for saltwater. That's like my go-to. And then for freshwater for bass, I'm really into soft plastics overall. I like the watermelon seed flute.
I think the last one we got is favorite time of year to fish.
Probably spring, only because like I'm so like hyped up from the anticipation because I don't really do much winter fishing. But spring is probably my favorite time, although fall would probably be the ideal time. I think spring, I'm just ready to get outside, ready to get on the water.
Yeah.
So how late in the season are you starting on the inshore stuff? Is there pollen on the water? Are you starting a long time before that? Or like what's your go-to spring weather for fishing?
I would probably say I wait until at least like late March. Yeah. Yeah, for the ICW, sometimes even early April. But I will like get out and bass fish some before then.
All right. Well, we're going to start wrapping things up. What do you have coming up next for you? So if our listeners want to kind of follow along with your journey, what's coming up next?
As far as what's coming up next, let's see. I was toying around with the idea of possibly starting like a t-shirt company that was like geared towards fishing and tying that into like a coastal theme. So I'm toying around with that idea. And I feel like just getting more people out into like the whole sport of kayak fishing and paddleboard fishing, and especially like a diverse group of people. Like I feel like, well, and as far as like diversity, there's not as many people from different ethnicities that participate in kayaking or stand up paddleboarding. So and even just females in general, just getting more women out there as well.
Okay, absolutely. And it, like I said, if they do want to follow along with your journey, where do they find you? Social media, YouTube, websites, any of that kind of thing?
So on Facebook, you can find me under Dominique Sherrill. That's my first and middle name. And then on Instagram, it's under Dom0087.
All right. And wanted to give you an open floor to give any kind of shout outs, say thank you, sponsors, supporters, anybody you want to say thank you to. The floor is yours.
Well, I would like to give a shout out to Carolina Waters for allowing me to be a brand ambassador on their team, and it's been a fun ride so far, and it's been my first and only experience, being a brand ambassador. So, I'm looking for more opportunities to get out there and get some sponsors possibly. But yeah, definitely want to give a shout out to Carolina Waters for sure.
Okay. And I'll move aside for just a minute and let you throw your code out there for Carolina Waters, so that if our listeners want to go and support you, they have that opportunity to do that.
Okay, and I think it's Mitchell 15. I have to look again. I know it's on my Instagram page. It's definitely on the Instagram at the top,
That
and I have
sounds
a
right
whole link on
because mine is my last name in 15. So,
there. Okay.
but yeah, CarolinaWatersNC.com. Go check it out, y'all. But yeah, anybody else you wanted to give a shout out to before we close it up?
I believe that's going to be it.
All right. Well, Dom, thank you so much for coming on the show. We had a blast. It's always fun to talk about things we've never talked about on the show before, and to give our listeners something new to chew on and listen to. So.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
All right. So that is gonna do it for that episode. Robert, what did you want to throw out there for closing up on this one?
I had Instagram pulled up when she was talking about that. She was exactly right. Mitchell 15 is her code for Carolina Water. So you guys check that out. Get a hat from her, and then go under Cam's discount and get a shirt. Support both of them. And you mentioned Travis Harrison before, and the Jawbreaker jigs. It's 432 fishing. So it's at 4. Yep, it's on Instagram. It's the at symbol and 43_2 fishing. So 432 fishing to get those Jawbreaker jig heads for those sheep head, and he does a lot of other cool stuff. So check out his Instagram and hit him up for some hand tied and just awesome stuff that you're not going to get anywhere else, and awesome stuff that other people are not throwing, because that might be the edge you need to land one of those big reds that Dom was talking about.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's go ahead. Let's pray and close it out, and then we will we'll call it an episode. You want to pray this time?
Yeah, I got you. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for allowing us to spread your word. Thank you for allowing us to take this time each week and raise you up. We appreciate Dom coming on and sharing her faith story and sharing her fishing memories. And please watch over us this week and throughout the end of this summer. Let everybody have a safe Labor Day weekend out on the water. Please let everybody make good decisions and forgive us of our sins, and please let our actions and words bring people closer to you. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Y'all take care and God bless.
Take it easy.
Thank you for listening to the Faith and Fishing podcast. Please consider supporting those that support us. Jade's Jigs lead-free finesse tackle. Use promo code FNF10 at jadesjigs.com for 10% off. Save your outdoors. Stop losing your gear. Use promo code FNFP15 at saveyouroutdoors.com for 15% off. Omnia Fishing. Check out Premium, Premium Pro, and their Ambassador program. Use promo code FNF10 for 10% off at omniafishing.com. And if it's your first order, use promo code FNF15 for 15% instead. Mr. B Lure Company. High-quality handmade baits made right here in the U.S. MrBLureCompany.com. Use promo code faithnfishn pod for 15% off your first purchase. Get outdoors, pedal, and paddle. Check them out at the shop in Greensboro, North Carolina, or at shopgetoutdoors.com for all your paddling and cycling needs. And Naqua Adventure Gear, lighting, power, and all the connectors at Naqua.com. Please rate, review, subscribe on whatever app you're listening on. That's going to do it for this episode. Y'all take care and God bless.